"Excuse me, young lady." The judge's voice echoed across the silent courtroom. "Are you lost? This is a court of law, not a hospital. Go change into something appropriate." Jaws dropped. A gasp rippled through the audience. Standing alone near the front bench was a tall black woman, still in her light blue scrubs, a stethoscope draped around her neck, hospital badge dangling from her collar. Her face was calm, but her eyes didn't blink. The room stared at her like she had stepped into the wrong world, like she didn't belong. "I'm not lost," she said. "I'm here for a hearing. My shift just ended, and I rushed straight from the emergency room to be here." The judge leaned back with a raised brow, clearly annoyed. "And yet, you didn't think it was respectful to dress properly for court?" What happened next made every soul in that courtroom rise to their feet. But to understand how a nurse in scrubs got scolded in court, and how her response shook the walls of that room, we have to go back to the day before the hearing, back to when it all began. The morning sun was barely peeking through the window blinds when Brianna Jefferson clocked in at Mercy General Hospital. It was 6:53 a.m. Her shift didn't start for another 7 minutes, but she liked to be early. Her sneakers squeaked on the polished floor as she made her way to the nurse's station. "Morning, Bree," called out Jessica, a fellow nurse. "Morning," Brianna replied with a tired smile. She hadn't slept much the night before. She never did anymore. Not since the custody battle started. Her 9-year-old son, Caleb, was everything to her. Smart, curious, always asking questions about space and dinosaurs and how airplanes stayed in the sky. His laugh could melt glaciers, but lately, she hadn't heard it as often. It started 6 months ago when her ex-husband, Daniel, suddenly decided he wanted full custody. Out of nowhere, Brianna had always been the primary caregiver. She bathed Caleb, helped with homework, took him to piano class, and stayed up with him when he had nightmares. Daniel, who lived in another state and barely called, now claimed she was too busy and too unstable to be a good mom. He had money, connections, lawyers. Brianna had long hours, a paycheck that barely covered rent and daycare, and her truth. She had been juggling hospital shifts and court documents for weeks, trying to stay afloat. Her lawyer had filed a motion for emergency custody, and today was the day before the judge would decide whether Caleb stayed with her or was taken away. At 3 p.m., during her lunch break, Brianna sat in the break room, flipping through a manila folder full of court papers. Her fingers trembled as she reread the last document. Motion to declare temporary unfit parenting conditions. "He's lying," she whispered. "None of this is true." "What's going on?" asked Sam, a security guard who had known Brianna since her residency days. "Court hearing tomorrow," she said. "Dan's trying to take Caleb." Sam frowned. "You need anything, you let me know. I've seen you work double shifts, save lives, sit with patients long after the bell rings. You're a damn good nurse. And from what I've seen, a better mom." That gave her strength. For a while, the rest of her shift passed like a hurricane. A young boy with a fractured arm came in screaming. A code blue was called on a heart patient. An elderly woman broke down in Brianna's arms after losing her husband. She didn't stop moving. There was no time to cry, no time to think. At 6:49 p.m., she finally clocked out. She had less than 12 hours before court. That night, at home, Caleb asked her, "Do I have to go live with Daddy?" She forced a smile. "No, baby. I'm going to make sure you stay right here." "But what if the judge doesn't like us?" he asked. Brianna knelt down and hugged him tightly. "Then we'll show them who we really are." The next morning, she dressed Caleb, made him pancakes, and dropped him off at school with a long hug. "Be good, okay?" "I always am," he said, grinning. She rushed to work. Her plan was to clock out early, go home, change into formal clothes, and get to court. But emergencies don't wait. At 10:15 a.m., a multi-car crash victim was rolled into the ER. At 11 o'clock, a diabetic man collapsed near the entrance. By 12:05, Brianna looked at the clock and realized she had exactly 25 minutes to make it across town to the courthouse. She didn't think twice. She grabbed her bag, threw on her coat, and raced through traffic. Her scrubs were stained from work, her badge still clipped to her top, and the stethoscope hung forgotten around her neck. She arrived at the courthouse at 12:31 p.m. The guard looked her up and down. "You here to testify, or something?" "I'm the mother," she said, breathless. Inside the courtroom, Daniel sat smug in a navy blue suit. His lawyer looked up, then whispered something into the judge's ear. That's when the judge looked directly at Brianna. "Excuse me, young lady," he said. And now here she stood, the whole room staring. "I'm not lost," she repeated. The judge's gavel hit the desk. "You need to show respect to this courtroom." There was silence. Brianna took one step forward. "Your Honor, I just finished a 12-hour shift saving lives. I'm sorry I didn't have time to put on heels or a blazer, but I wasn't going to miss this hearing for anything. Not when my son's future is at stake." "That's not an excuse," the judge began. "No, sir, it's not an excuse. It's my life." The room was holding its breath. "I'm a nurse. I serve this community every single day. I miss birthdays, holidays, and sleep just to make sure someone else gets another chance to live. So yes, I'm in scrubs. But don't mistake this uniform for disrespect. It's a symbol of hard work and sacrifice, and I will not be shamed for wearing it." And then, without warning, one by one, people in the room stood. First, a man in the back row, then a woman holding a baby, then another, and another, until the entire courtroom, lawyers, bailiffs, even one juror from a different case, were standing and clapping. Even the court stenographer stood up, tears in her eyes. Brianna didn't move. She stood still, hands at her sides, heart racing. The judge blinked. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. But something had shifted. Something unspoken had filled the room. And just then, the courtroom doors swung open. Everyone turned toward the entrance. A figure walked in, and the energy in the room changed all over again. The large double doors at the back of the courtroom creaked as they swung open. A woman in a gray suit stepped inside, walking briskly with a thick black folder clutched to her chest. Her heels clicked on the marble floor like a metronome in a tense orchestra. Everyone turned. The standing applause tapered off into quiet murmurs and whispers. The woman stopped just behind the last row of benches and scanned the courtroom with sharp eyes, finally landing her gaze on the judge. "Apologies for the interruption, Your Honor," she said clearly. "I represent Ms. Jefferson. My name is Cassandra Ellis. I filed a motion supplement this morning." Brianna's mouth fell open. She had no idea who this woman was. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You're not on the record as her counsel." "I am now." "Emergency filing. Check with the clerk." The court clerk, startled, clicked furiously at her computer. Within seconds, her eyes widened. "She's right, Your Honor. The filing was received and stamped at 8:02 a.m. today." Brianna felt her knees wobble. This wasn't her original attorney. She didn't recognize Cassandra's name at all. Still, Cassandra walked with authority. She didn't glance at Brianna or her opponent. She simply handed the black folder to the bailiff. "These documents should be reviewed immediately. They include hospital records, performance reviews, character witness statements, and documentation of the father's recent arrest." Brianna's heart slammed against her chest. "Arrest?" Daniel shifted in his seat. "That's not true." "Sit down, Mr. Jefferson," the judge said sternly. "We'll review this before continuing." He turned to Cassandra. "Why the emergency substitution of counsel?" "I was asked to step in by an outside source," Cassandra said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were fire. "Someone who believes justice is more than a suit and tie. Someone who believes a mother who saves lives deserves someone to fight for hers." She glanced sideways, just briefly, at Brianna, and for the first time, gave the tiniest nod. Brianna felt frozen in place. This woman didn't just walk in. She stormed the gates. The judge motioned for a recess and left the bench, taking the folder with him. As the courtroom slowly emptied, murmurs filled the space. Daniel scowled and muttered something to his lawyer. Brianna sat down slowly, her legs still trembling. Her hands fidgeted with the zipper of her bag. Cassandra sat beside her. I don't understand," Brianna whispered. "You're my lawyer now?" "For the rest of this case," Cassandra said. "Pro bono." "Why?" "You helped my father 2 months ago. Cardiac arrest, flatlined twice. You stayed with him all night after surgery. You didn't know who I was, and you didn't care. That's the kind of person I fight for." Brianna blinked. I didn't even remember his name. You were busy saving his life." Brianna stared ahead, stunned. "I didn't think anyone noticed." Cassandra smiled faintly. "More people noticed than you think." For the first time that morning, Brianna felt like the floor wasn't going to collapse under her. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Outside, the wind had picked up. Clouds gathered thickly over the courthouse. Inside, Daniel's attorney was pacing, clearly rattled. They're trying to pull something, he whispered. They want to stall? This is a ploy. But Daniel didn't speak. He looked uneasy now, nervous. Back in the hallway, Brianna leaned against a wall, her mind racing. Cassandra stood beside her, going over a document. This report shows you've worked over 100 overtime hours in the last 3 months. That's good. Good. It proves your commitment, and it explains why sometimes the dishes aren't done or Caleb's backpack wasn't signed. You weren't neglecting him. You were providing for him. Brianna lowered her eyes. I'm trying. I know, Cassandra said, flipping to the next page. And it's time they know too. Just then, the hallway doors burst open again. Brianna's breath caught. It was the hospital's chief nursing officer, Ms. Donna Reyes. And behind her, 2 nurses, a paramedic, and a doctor from the ER. They had come, dressed in their uniforms. What is this? Brianna whispered. Reyes smiled. You're not the only one with court today. Wait, how did you? Reyes gently touched her shoulder. We heard. That's all I'll say. The staff didn't speak much. They stood in silent support, forming a quiet line outside the courtroom. Each one had come on their own. Some were off shift. One even wore slippers under her scrubs. The courtroom buzzed again. People walking by turned to look, confused at the sudden crowd of medical professionals outside courtroom 3B. Inside, the judge returned and called everyone back in. Everyone took their seats. This court has reviewed the supplemental documents, he began. We will proceed with testimony, but be advised, this new material has significantly altered the context of the case. Cassandra stood. Your Honor, we call our first witness, Brianna Jefferson. Brianna rose slowly. Her scrubs rustled with every movement. As she made her way to the stand, she passed by Daniel. For the first time, he wouldn't meet her eyes. Cassandra guided her through the oath and stepped back. Ms. Jefferson, the judge said, please describe your parenting situation and why you believe your son should remain in your care. Brianna looked down at her hands, then at the judge. I don't have the perfect life, she said, her voice quiet at first. I don't have a big house or weekends free. I work long shifts in the ER. I come home tired. Sometimes I forget to do laundry. Sometimes I fall asleep at the kitchen table. A few people in the gallery smiled softly. But when my son needs me, I am there. Every scrape, every nightmare, every science project, I show up. He doesn't have a lot, but he has love, and he knows that he is safe and wanted and deeply, deeply cared for. She paused, her voice thick. I didn't come here today to impress anyone. I came straight from work because my time isn't always mine. People's lives depend on it. But the one life I will never stop fighting for is Caleb's. A hush fell over the room. Cassandra stepped forward. No further questions. Daniel's lawyer stood. We have a few. He walked to the stand with a stack of printed texts and photos. Ms. Jefferson, he said, can you explain these late pickup records from school? Yes, Brianna replied. I was in surgery recovery. There was a snowstorm, and traffic was backed up. I called the school. They understood. And these 3 missed parent-teacher meetings? I worked a double shift that week. I spoke to the teacher afterward and rescheduled. The lawyer leaned in. So would it be fair to say that your work gets in the way of your parenting? Brianna didn't flinch. I would say my work supports my parenting. The room murmured again. The judge raised his hand. Enough. I have heard enough for now. We'll reconvene after lunch for the ruling. The gavel came down. People started filing out again. Brianna sat frozen in her chair. Cassandra touched her shoulder. You did great. But Brianna didn't hear her. Because just then, her phone buzzed violently in her pocket. She pulled it out. A text from Caleb's school. Emergency, Caleb missing. Brianna's heart slammed against her ribs as the words on her screen burned into her eyes. Emergency, Caleb missing. She stared at the text, then blinked hard, hoping she'd read it wrong. But no, it was there, plain and cruel. Her breath caught in her throat. Her knees weakened. She shot up from her seat so fast the wooden bench scraped backward with a loud screech. Cassandra turned, startled. Brianna? Brianna's lips moved, but no sound came out. She shoved the phone at her attorney, trembling. Cassandra took it and read the message. Her eyes widened. Judge, she called out across the courtroom, her voice sharp. The judge, just about to exit the bench, stopped in his tracks. There's been an emergency, Cassandra said. We need a recess immediately. Miss Jefferson's son is missing. Whispers exploded through the room like wildfire. The bailiff snapped to attention, instinctively placing a hand on his radio. "What do you mean missing?" the judge asked, stepping down. Cassandra handed him the phone. He stared at the message, his jaw tightening. Brianna was already moving, half running down the aisle, her scrubs flapping against her legs, her bag bouncing against her hip. "I have to go," she gasped. "I have to find him." Cassandra chased after her. "I'll drive. Let's go." The courtroom doors flew open again. The hallway that had been filled with chatter seconds ago now felt like a tunnel, distant and muffled. Brianna's pulse roared in her ears. They tore down the courthouse steps and bolted for Cassandra's black SUV, parked illegally right in front. "I'll handle the ticket," she muttered, tossing her heels in the back and throwing the car into drive. Brianna's hands shook as she called the school. "Yes, this is Brianna Jefferson, Caleb's mother. Please tell me what happened." The voice on the other end was nervous, frazzled. "Ms. Jefferson, Caleb wasn't in his classroom after lunch. We checked the bathrooms, the playground, everywhere. We called Daniel Jefferson. He didn't answer. So we contacted you immediately. The authorities are being notified now." Brianna's eyes filled with tears. "You don't think he ran away, do you?" "We don't know. He seemed fine this morning. Nothing unusual, but he's gone, Miss Jefferson." Cassandra didn't speak. She drove like lightning, weaving through cars, ignoring angry honks. By the time they reached the school, 2 patrol cars were parked out front. Brianna bolted through the main doors. "Where's my son?" The front office secretary pointed toward the principal's office. Principal Ward stepped out, her brow furrowed with worry. "Ms. Jefferson, we're doing everything we can. The police are searching the area. We've put the school in a soft lockdown. We're checking all cameras." "Was he upset? Did someone say something to him?" "I don't know." Just then, a detective walked in, flipping through a small notepad. "You're the mother?" "Yes," Brianna said breathlessly. "We're pulling surveillance footage. Has Caleb mentioned anything about running away? Anyone bothering him? Anything unusual?" "No. He was fine. He had pancakes. He told me he loved me this morning. He was smiling when I dropped him off." Brianna clutched her chest. Her mind spun. What if someone took him? What if? Her phone buzzed again. She fumbled it in her hands. Another text. No name. Just a number. "He's safe. I have him." Her blood turned to ice. Cassandra, standing behind her, saw her expression change. "What is it?" Brianna showed her the message. Cassandra took the phone. "This is a threat. We need to trace it, now." The detective moved fast, signaling his partner to contact cybercrime. "Did your son have a phone?" "No, just a smartwatch. GPS enabled. Do you know the number?" Brianna rattled it off, her voice cracking. The detective got on the radio. "We're initiating a trace. Begin a ping on the smartwatch ID." Cassandra pulled Brianna aside. "Who would do this? Think. Who would want to scare you right now?" Brianna stared at her, and then her eyes narrowed. "Daniel," she said. They both turned at once. "Where is Daniel Jefferson?" Brianna barked. The detective answered. "He left the courthouse right after you did. No one's seen him since." Brianna's hands curled into fists. "He took my son." "We don't know that," the officer said. "Yes, we do," she shouted. "He knew he was going to lose the case, so he ran. He couldn't win in court, so he stole him." The officer raised his hand, trying to calm her. "We're working on tracking his phone now. If he took your son and crossed state lines, this is federal." Cassandra's phone rang. She stepped away and answered. After a tense moment, she returned. "The GPS pinged," she said. "It's moving north. Highway 87. Fast." Brianna's heart sank. That was the route to Daniel's cabin in Vermont. The detective sprang into action. "We'll issue an Amber Alert. You'll ride with me." Cassandra grabbed Brianna's arm. "I'm going too." "You're not law enforcement," the officer began. "She's her lawyer," Brianna snapped. "And she's coming." With a nod, the detective agreed. They rushed out to the cruiser. Sirens erupted. As they sped down the highway, Cassandra turned to Brianna. "We'll get him back." But Brianna was shaking. No, you don't understand. That cabin's isolated. He has no service there. If he gets there before we do." She couldn't finish. The tires screeched as they swerved onto the exit. Meanwhile, back at the courthouse, the judge sat quietly in chambers, flipping through the now crumpled emergency filing. His aide knocked once. "Sir, news just came in. The child is missing." The judge didn't react at first. Then, he slowly closed the file, looked out the window, and said, "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." Back on the road, just as the police cruiser crossed into Vermont, Brianna's smartwatch pinged. A new text. From Caleb's number. Just 2 words. "Help me." Brianna stared at the screen, her stomach flipping inside out. "Help me." 2 words. That was it. But it was enough to break something open in her chest. Enough to make the tears come, hot, silent, and burning down her cheeks. She handed the watch to the detective in the passenger seat. "He's alive," she said, her voice trembling. "He's scared. He's texting me from his watch." The detective snatched the device, already on his radio. "We've got a live ping. Subject is still mobile. Update location now." From the front seat, his partner called out, "We're 25 miles from a trailhead that leads up to Jefferson's registered property. We need backup waiting at the base. He could go off-road at any second." The cruiser surged forward, lights flashing. Trees whipped past in a blur of green and brown. Rain began to patter against the windshield, light at first, then steadier. Brianna gripped the handle on the door, her knuckles white. Cassandra, still beside her, leaned in. "He's texting. That means he still has a signal. You need to talk to him. Keep him calm. Keep him sending messages. We'll use every second." Brianna opened her phone. Her fingers shook as she typed back. "Where are you, baby? Are you hurt?" There was a long pause. Too long. Then finally, "I don't know. It's dark. He said we're going to a fort. I want to go home." Cassandra read over her shoulder. "Fort." Brianna's eyes widened. "That's what Daniel used to call the cabin. Caleb was little when we visited once. He thought it looked like a fort in the woods." "We're close," the officer said from the front. "Another 10 miles. Hang on, baby. I'm coming." "Do you see trees? Can you hear anything? A car? A river?" More silence. Then, trees. A big sound. "Like a train, maybe?" "Train," Brianna repeated aloud. "There's a train line. North of the property, maybe a mile out." "We'll split the search," the detective replied. "You'll ride in with us. Do not approach if you see them first. Let us do our job." Brianna didn't answer. She couldn't. The cruiser veered onto a gravel path, and the car jerked violently as the tires crunched over loose stone. Through the misty trees, a long dirt driveway appeared. The cabin. It was there. 2 stories, wood siding, green roof. Hidden by trees. Isolated. The cruiser stopped behind a second patrol unit. 2 officers stood behind open doors, weapons holstered but ready. The lead detective got out, talking into his shoulder radio. Cassandra turned to Brianna. "Stay close to me, no matter what you see." The officers advanced slowly through the brush. Then, a noise. Branches breaking. A rustle. Brianna froze. Suddenly, a small figure broke through the trees, running, stumbling, arms flailing. "Caleb," she screamed. He sprinted into her arms so hard, he knocked her backward onto the gravel. "Mommy! Mommy!" he sobbed into her chest, his little arms clinging like vines. Brianna wrapped herself around him, rocking him like a baby. Her tears mixed with the light drizzle. "You're okay," she whispered. "You're okay. I've got you." Cassandra knelt beside them, placing a hand on Caleb's back. "I told him I wanted to stay with you," Caleb hiccuped. "He yelled at me, and then I ran. I hid until I saw you coming. I was scared. You were so brave, baby. So brave." Then, a shout. "Hands up. Let me see your hands." It was the police, and they had found Daniel. He was crouched behind the cabin, trying to loop around the back trail. In a matter of seconds, he was surrounded, cuffed, and pressed against a squad car. "Let go of me. I'm his father. You're under arrest for parental kidnapping, unlawful restraint, and crossing state lines to avoid custody laws," an officer said. Daniel thrashed. "She was going to take him away from me. You don't understand." Cassandra stepped forward. "The court was about to rule, and you knew it wasn't going to be in your favor. I wasn't going to lose him." "You already did," Brianna said, standing with Caleb still clutched in her arms. Her voice was steady now, strong. "You didn't lose him in court," she continued. "You lost him the moment you scared your own son and ran like a coward." Daniel didn't respond. The officers hauled him away, his voice fading behind the trees. Back at the car, Caleb had calmed enough to sit wrapped in a warm blanket from the police. His cheeks were red from the cold, but he was safe. Cassandra gently touched Brianna's arm. "We'll go back to court. I'll call the judge myself. This changes everything." Brianna nodded. "Can we just sit here for a minute?" Of course. She slid into the back seat with Caleb, pulling him close. Mommy, he whispered. Yeah, baby. You really came for me. She kissed the top of his head. I always will. And as the sirens lit the damp forest in flashes of red and blue, Brianna closed her eyes, holding her son, listening to the rhythm of his breath. But far from over, the story was only beginning to ripple, because back at the courthouse, a reporter had been in the gallery that morning, and by that evening, the headline on national news would read, Judge scolds black nurse for wearing scrubs in court. Her response makes the room stand and clap. By nightfall, Brianna's name was everywhere. Her phone buzzed nonstop, texts from coworkers, old classmates, even distant relatives she hadn't spoken to in years. Bree, you're on the news. Girl, I saw the video. You had the whole courtroom standing. Are you okay? Is Caleb safe? Safe. That was the word that grounded her. She looked down at Caleb, asleep in the hospital bed beside her. After they brought him in for observation, doctors confirmed what she already knew. He was shaken, tired, but unharmed. The kidnapping charges against Daniel had turned the entire custody case upside down. For now, Caleb was staying with Brianna under full emergency custody. But her mind was spinning. The sudden attention felt strange. Unfamiliar. Cassandra sat nearby, scrolling her phone. She turned the screen toward Brianna. It was a grainy cell phone video from the courtroom. The one where Brianna had stood up in her scrubs and said, "This uniform is not disrespect. It's a symbol of hard work and sacrifice." The video had been shared over 600,000 times. Someone had added music underneath it, soft piano chords, and text overlays like "Real Hero" and "Everyday Queen." Brianna shook her head. I didn't do anything special. Cassandra raised a brow. You stood up for yourself. That's rare. Especially in that room. I didn't want to lose him. You didn't. The door opened quietly. A nurse stepped in with a clipboard. Ms. Jefferson? Yes. There's a crowd downstairs. Brianna blinked. Hey, what? Reporters. Cameras. Someone from Channel 7 News. They're asking for a statement. Brianna's face dropped. I didn't ask for all this, she whispered. I know, Cassandra said, standing. I'll handle it. You stay here with Caleb. But before she could step out, Caleb stirred. Mommy, he mumbled, eyes half-lidded. I'm here, baby. He looked around sleepily. Why are there so many people outside? Brianna laughed softly. Because your mom made a little noise in a quiet room. Caleb blinked up at her. Did we win? That made her pause. Then she said, not yet. But we're close. The next morning came fast. Brianna hadn't slept. By 8 a.m., she and Cassandra were back in court. Caleb stayed at the hospital with a nurse friend of Brianna's, coloring dinosaurs and eating waffles. This time, when Brianna walked into the courtroom, she wasn't alone. There were cameras in the hall, and even court officers gave her respectful nods. People recognized her now, not as just another overworked nurse, but as the nurse. Inside the courtroom, it was the same judge. His robe was neatly pressed, his gavel resting at his side. He cleared his throat as everyone settled in. This court has reviewed the emergency custody situation and the events that transpired during and after yesterday's hearing. He looked directly at Brianna. Ms. Jefferson, I owe you an apology. The courtroom stilled. When you entered this court in your work uniform, I assumed disrespect. I failed to consider the weight of what you carry every day, both in your profession and as a mother. That was wrong. I judged your clothing instead of your character. Brianna blinked, stunned. He continued. The evidence presented shows not only a clear pattern of responsible, loving care for your child, but also that Mr. Jefferson knowingly and unlawfully removed him from your custody. These actions are not only disqualifying, they are criminal. He looked down, signed a form, and lifted it high. This court grants full legal and physical custody to Ms. Brianna Jefferson, effective immediately. A wave of gasps rippled through the room. Brianna clutched her chest, trying to breathe. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Cassandra placed a firm hand on her shoulder. You did it. Tears ran down Brianna's cheeks. But they weren't heavy or panicked. They were light, relieved, freeing. The judge added. Additionally, this court recommends Mr. Jefferson undergo psychiatric evaluation and supervised visitation, pending review. With that, the gavel fell. Boom. It was over. Cassandra hugged her tightly. Go get your boy. That afternoon, Brianna stepped into Caleb's hospital room with a manila envelope in her hands. Caleb looked up from his coloring book. Did the judge say anything? She knelt down beside the bed. You're mine, baby, she whispered. Now and forever. Caleb smiled, so wide it stretched his little face. Even if I spill milk? Yes. Even if I leave Legos in the hallway? Brianna laughed through her tears. Especially then. He wrapped his arms around her neck. I love you, Mommy. She held him tight, the way she had that night in the woods. And as the sun poured into the room through the big hospital window, Brianna knew. This was the highest high. But life has a funny way of keeping you guessing. Because later that night, as Brianna tucked Caleb into his own bed for the first time in weeks, a knock came at the door. Soft, calm, but firm. She opened it slowly. Two strangers stood there. A man in a dark suit. A woman with a notebook. They flashed badges. Ms. Jefferson? We're with the Department of Civil Rights Investigations. Brianna stiffened. What is this about? The woman spoke gently. The incident in court. The judge's remarks. The viral video. Brianna's stomach tightened. We believe what happened to you may be part of a larger pattern. And we'd like your help. Brianna stood frozen in her doorway. The man and woman from the Department of Civil Rights Investigations held their badges like they'd done this 1,000 times before. Their expressions were professional, polite, but there was something else behind their eyes. Intent. We understand this is a sensitive time, the woman said, flipping open a slim notebook. We'd like to speak with you about your experience in court. What was said to you? How you were treated? Brianna glanced back over her shoulder. Caleb's bedroom door was half closed. She could hear soft music playing, the lullaby playlist they used at night. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the door. Now's not a good time. The man nodded. We understand. But the pattern we're seeing, you might not be the first. The woman added. And based on the attention your case has drawn, you might be the only one who can shine a light on it. Brianna stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind her just enough to keep the warmth in. I'm not looking for a fight, she said, her voice low. I just wanted to keep my son. We know, the woman replied. But this fight might come looking for you anyway. The man held out a card. When you're ready. They turned and left. No pressure. No promises. Just possibilities. Brianna stood on the porch for a long time after they were gone. The cool air brushing against her face. The silence of the neighborhood settling around her like a quiet warning. The next morning, Cassandra called. You should know, she said. The judge submitted an official apology to the Judicial Review Board. He what? Brianna asked, eyes wide as she poured coffee into a chipped mug. Wrote it himself. Full admission of bias. Says your case opened his eyes. He's requesting formal training in implicit bias for the entire circuit. Brianna nearly dropped the mug. That doesn't happen. Well, it just did. She sat down hard at the kitchen table. But that's not all, Cassandra said. A reporter from the New York Times called. They want an interview. No, Brianna said instantly. Absolutely not. I don't want my face on every screen. This wasn't about fame. I know, Cassandra replied. But the exposure might help others. People who are fighting quiet battles, just like you were. Brianna closed her eyes. She could still feel the stares in that courtroom. Still hear the judge's voice, doubting her simply because she wore scrubs. Because she looked tired. Because she looked like her. I need to think about it, she said. Later that day, at the hospital, Brianna was back in uniform. Not for a shift, not yet, but she had promised to stop by for a meeting. As she stepped inside the ER, familiar faces lit up. Nurse Jefferson, called out Sam, the security guard. Back from court world. Barely, she smiled. Jessica rushed up and wrapped her in a hug. We watched the video at lunch. Everyone was crying. Even Dr. Martinez. He cries. Like a toddler. There was laughter. Smiles. A little light in a dark week. Donna Reyes, the chief nursing officer, pulled Brianna aside. Walk with me. They strolled past room 3B, where a young man lay recovering from appendicitis. Past the nurse's station, still buzzing with chatter and chart updates. I want you to consider something, Reyes said. We've been watching everything, and we've decided to offer you a new position. Brianna blinked. Eh, what? Assistant nurse manager. Leadership track. It's not just a raise, it's a path to more influence, more control over scheduling, more voice in policy. Brianna nearly choked. Me, she said. But I'm not. You're exactly what we need, Reyes said. Smart. Focused. Fierce. And you don't back down when it matters. Brianna stood in the middle of the hallway, stunned. You don't have to answer today, Reyes said with a smile. But think about it. As she turned to leave, Brianna's phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. I saw you on the news. You saved your son. Can you help me save mine? Her heart skipped. She texted back. Who is this? 3 dots blinked. Then came a reply. My name's Maya. I'm a nurse. My ex is trying to take my daughter. No one's listening. I don't have money for a lawyer. Please. Brianna stared at the screen. Her thumb hovered. Something shifted inside her. Slowly, she typed back. Tell me everything. That night, after Caleb had fallen asleep, Brianna sat at her tiny kitchen table with her laptop open, her phone charging nearby. She opened the Department of Civil Rights business card, scanned the number, then called. The line rang once. Then a voice, Agent Hudson. This is Brianna Jefferson, she said. I'm ready to talk. There was a pause. We've been waiting. At that very moment, across town, a figure sat in a dark office, replaying courtroom footage. Pause. Zoom. Rewind. The figure leaned forward, tapping a pen against the desk. Beside the monitor was a photo, a courtroom gavel, a list of names, and at the top, circled in red, Judge Robert Kellerman. The walls of the federal building were a pale gray, sterile and cold, like they'd been painted in silence. Brianna sat across from Agent Hudson in a small interview room with no windows. The only splash of color was the red notebook the agent flipped open in front of her. Agent Hudson was calm, focused, and direct. She didn't smile much, but she didn't seem cold either, more like someone used to carrying heavy truths. Everything you say is confidential for now, she said. But we are compiling formal records that may be used in a wider judicial misconduct case. What you tell us today could help uncover a pattern of systemic bias. Brianna nodded slowly. She had asked Cassandra to stay home this time, not because she didn't trust her, but because this was something she needed to say on her own. Hudson started recording. Let's begin with the day of your custody hearing. Tell me what happened from the moment you entered the courtroom. Brianna took a deep breath. I got off work late. I didn't have time to change. I showed up in scrubs. I didn't think it mattered. I just wanted to be there on time for my son. Hudson didn't interrupt. She just wrote, page after page. Brianna described the moment the judge scolded her. How he spoke to her like she was out of place, not just in dress, but in presence. How he had never once said a word to Daniel about his appearance or record. How did that make you feel? Hudson asked. Like I had to prove I was even allowed in the room. Like being a nurse, a mother, wasn't enough because of how I looked. Because you're black. Brianna hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I felt it in my bones. They went deeper. Hudson asked about past court hearings, about the original custody split, about subtle comments that hadn't raised alarms at the time, but felt different in hindsight. The interview lasted over 2 hours. At the end, Hudson closed her notebook. You're not the only one, she said. We've been building a list. Cases flagged for disproportionate rulings, harsher tones, unexplained delays, especially when the mother is a woman of color. She handed Brianna a folder. Inside were copies of formal complaints, most of them anonymous. Do you recognize any of these names? Hudson asked. Brianna flipped through the pages. One name jumped out. Latasha Green. That name's come up more than once, Hudson said. Brianna leaned forward. She used to work in our hospital cafeteria. She lost custody of her twins last year. Said the judge didn't let her speak. She disappeared after that. No one's seen her since. Hudson's eyes sharpened. Would you be willing to help us find her? Brianna hesitated. I don't know where she went. Maybe not yet. But people trust you now. You're not just a nurse anymore. You're a voice. That hit her harder than she expected. She was quiet the whole drive home. That evening, Brianna stood in the kitchen stirring macaroni while Caleb sat at the table coloring. He glanced up. Are you still thinking about that scary day? A little, she said. But only because I want to make sure no other kids have to go through it. Are you going to be on the news again? He asked. She smiled. Not if I can help it. But before she could answer further, her phone buzzed. A new text. Unknown number. We need to meet. I have information about Judge Kellerman. I saw something. Please don't go to the police yet. Brianna's brow furrowed. She texted back. Who is this? No name. Just a reply. Latasha. Her pulse jumped. She put down the spoon. Caleb looked up. Everything okay? Yeah, baby, she said quickly. Everything's fine. She texted again. Where can we meet? Latasha, tomorrow. 7 p.m. Granger Library. Back entrance. Come alone. Brianna stared at the screen for a long time. Was it really her? And if it was, what did she see? The next evening, the library parking lot was nearly empty when Brianna arrived. The streetlights flickered above, casting long shadows across the pavement. She walked around to the back entrance, heart pounding, her phone in her hand just in case. A figure stepped out from the shadows near the dumpsters. Worn jeans, oversized hoodie, eyes that looked tired but alert. Latasha? The woman nodded, pulling the hood down. I knew you'd come. Brianna stepped closer. Are you okay? People said you disappeared. Latasha looked around nervously. I had to. After the custody ruling, I tried to appeal. They threatened me. Told me if I pushed it, I'd lose more than my kids. Who threatened you? Brianna asked, voice low. Latasha hesitated, then pulled a folded piece of paper from her hoodie pocket. It was a copy of a court transcript. Certain lines were highlighted. One from Judge Kellerman, another from a private investigator hired by her ex, a man later arrested for witness intimidation. They were working together, Latasha said. Him and the judge. Fixing outcomes. If the dad had money or connections, the mom didn't stand a chance. Brianna's blood ran cold. Are you saying this was a pattern? Yes, Latasha said. And if they know I'm talking to you, they'll come after me again. Brianna looked her in the eye. Then we bring it into the light. Together. Latasha paused, then nodded, just as they turned to walk back toward the lot. A black SUV turned the corner, headlights flashing once. Latasha froze. That's him, she whispered. Brianna grabbed her arm. Run. They darted across the lot and ducked behind a row of bushes as the SUV crept forward, scanning. The engine idled for several seconds. Then, the vehicle sped off. Brianna's heart thudded against her ribs. Latasha was shaking. We have to go, Brianna said. Right now. And as they vanished into the night, Brianna knew. This was no longer just her fight. This was bigger than courtrooms and custody. This was about justice, and the system that had buried it. Brianna drove with one hand clenched so tightly around the steering wheel that her knuckles turned white. Latasha sat in the passenger seat, trembling but silent, her arms folded across her chest, as if trying to hold herself together. The black SUV was gone, for now. Brianna's mind raced. She couldn't take Latasha back to her own house. That would put Caleb at risk. She couldn't go back to the hospital either. Too many people, too many eyes. Her brain flipped through every place she knew until it landed on one. An old apartment where a friend of Cassandra's stayed, half empty because the owner traveled a lot. Brianna called Cassandra, voice low and urgent. We need a place to hide out. Just for a little while. There was a pause on the other end. Use my cousin's place on Oak Street. I'll text you the code for the door. No one will find you there. Thank you. She hung up, turning sharply down a side street, heart hammering. Latasha finally spoke, her voice hoarse. They scared me so bad, Brianna. After I lost my girls, I didn't know what to do. I thought maybe if I stayed quiet, they'd give me a chance to see them again. Brianna's throat tightened. You don't have to be scared anymore. We're going to fix this. But inside, she wasn't so sure. They were up against people who knew the system inside out. People who wore suits by day and made threats by night. And if Judge Kellerman was involved in something darker than just prejudice, it was dangerous. Very dangerous. The apartment was small but clean. There was a couch with a missing cushion, a coffee table stacked with magazines from 2 years ago, and a tiny kitchen that smelled like lemon soap. Brianna locked the door behind them and set the deadbolt. Latasha sank into the couch like all the air had gone out of her. Brianna made tea, cheap store-brand chamomile from the cabinet, and sat across from her. Start from the beginning, Brianna said. Tell me everything you know. Latasha took a shaking breath. It wasn't just me, she said. After the custody case, I met others. Women like me. Working moms. Mostly black or Latina. Every time the dad had a certain lawyer, Connolly, the cases went the same way. Brianna's mind snapped to attention. Connolly. That was Daniel's lawyer too. They offered deals under the table. Latasha continued. Make the moms look unstable. Say they missed appointments. Bring fake witnesses sometimes. If you had enough money, you could buy a win. Brianna felt sick. And Kellerman? Latasha nodded. I don't know how deep he is, but he always ruled for their side. Always. Even when it didn't make sense. Brianna stood up, pacing. This is bigger than just a bad judge. This is corruption. Latasha looked down at her tea. And nobody's been able to stop them. Brianna stopped pacing. Her jaw tightened. Until now. The next morning, Brianna went to the federal building again. This time she didn't ask for an appointment. She marched straight to the front desk, Latasha right behind her. The receptionist blinked up at her. Can I help you? I need to see Agent Hudson. Tell her it's Brianna Jefferson. It's urgent. 10 minutes later, they were back in the same gray interview room. Hudson entered, shutting the door behind her. She looked surprised to see Latasha, but not displeased. What's this about? Hudson asked. Brianna handed over the court transcript Latasha had given her. Proof. And there's more. Witnesses. Patterns. Connections between lawyers and the judge. Hudson sat down slowly, flipping through the papers. This is bigger than we thought, she murmured. If this is true. It is true, Brianna said firmly. And we can prove it. Hudson looked up, her expression unreadable. There's a risk, she said. Once we start this process, it's public record. These people, they won't go down quietly. Brianna's stomach twisted. She thought of Caleb. His bright smile, his soft, sleepy hugs. I'm not backing down, she said. Not if it means protecting other mothers. Other kids. Hudson studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. All right, let's begin. By the end of the day, an official federal investigation had been opened into Judge Kellerman's courtroom. Latasha gave a sworn statement. Cassandra, when Brianna called her, immediately volunteered to assist with legal strategies. Word traveled fast. Within hours, a few local news stations picked up on rumors of misconduct. The courthouse tried to keep it quiet, but the internet wasn't forgiving. And somewhere out there, beyond the TV screens, beyond the city limits, someone was watching. In a dark car, in a parking garage, a man with a crooked nose and sharp eyes tapped a message into a burner phone. Jefferson's making noise. Handle it. The reply came back immediately. Tonight. That night, after Caleb was tucked into bed and the apartment was quiet, Brianna finally allowed herself to breathe. Her body ached from the stress, but her heart was steady. She stood at the kitchen sink, staring out the window into the dark street beyond. No movement. No sound. Just stillness. Until a flicker of shadow across the porch. A tiny scrape of shoe against wood. Her skin prickled. She turned off the kitchen light quickly and moved to the door, pressing her eye against the peephole. Two figures. Standing still. Waiting. Her heart thudded painfully. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands and texted Cassandra. Two men outside. Not moving. Porch. What do I do? The reply came instantly. Stay calm. Call 911. Don't open the door. I'm on my way. Brianna swallowed hard. She dialed 911. Her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. As she gave her address, there was a sudden knock. Not gentle. Not polite. Hard. Demanding. Bang. 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 Caleb stirred in his room. Brianna clutched the phone, standing between the door and her son's room. The operator's voice in her ear was calm. Units are 2 minutes away. Stay on the line. Another bang at the door. And then, a voice. Low. Menacing. Open up, Brianna. We just want to talk. Her blood froze. They knew her name. Brianna didn't move. She didn't breathe. The voice outside the door sent a chill down her spine, cold and sharp like a knife pressed against her skin. Brianna. The voice called again, sickly sweet now. Open the door. We don't want to hurt you. We just need a little conversation. She pressed the phone tighter to her ear. They know my name. She whispered to the 911 operator. Stay away from the door, ma'am, the operator said. Units are almost there. 2 blocks away. Stay where you are. The doorknob jiggled. A rough shove rattled the frame. Brianna's body moved before her brain could even finish thinking. She darted across the small living room, silently flipping the lock on Caleb's door. Inside, he stirred again. Mommy, he mumbled sleepily. Stay in bed, baby, she whispered through the crack in the door. Stay quiet. She closed the door softly and backed away, heart hammering in her ears. A heavy thud slammed into the front door. Once. Twice. They were trying to break it down. Brianna's whole body shook, but her mind sharpened with the kind of clarity that only terror can bring. She scanned the room for anything, a weapon, a way out. The windows were too small. The back door was deadbolt from the outside, meant to keep people from breaking in, not from escaping out. She had one move, delay. She grabbed a chair and wedged it under the doorknob. It wouldn't stop them forever, but it would buy a minute. Maybe two. The sirens screamed in the distance. Growing closer. The men must have heard it too, because suddenly the pounding stopped. She ran to the peephole again. One of the men, stocky, wearing a black hoodie, was glancing nervously over his shoulder. The other, taller and wiry, pulled something shiny from his waistband. A crowbar. They weren't leaving. They were going to finish what they started before the cops could get there. Another crash against the door. The chair buckled, but held. Then, a blinding splash of red and blue lights exploded across the front windows. "Police!" someone shouted. "Hands where we can see them." The men bolted. One jumped off the porch, sprinting down the street. The other tried to double back around the side of the house. Brianna sagged against the wall, gasping, as uniformed officers swarmed past the windows. A minute later, a heavy knock rattled the door again, but this time it was firm, official. "Ms. Jefferson, it's the police. You're safe now." She collapsed into the nearest chair, shaking so hard she could barely stand. She fumbled with the chair at the door, pushing it aside. When she cracked the door open, two officers stood there, guns holstered, calm but alert. "We have one in custody," one said. "The other's being chased by backup units. Are you okay?" Brianna nodded numbly. "My son," she gasped. "Check on him. We'll secure the property." She raced to Caleb's room, her heart pounding. He was sitting up in bed, eyes wide with terror. "Mommy!" "The banging!" he cried, reaching for her. She swooped him up into her arms. "It's okay, baby. It's okay. The police are here. You're safe." His small arms locked around her neck. She sat on the floor, rocking him back and forth, whispering words she barely believed herself. "You're safe. I promise." 20 minutes later, Cassandra burst into the house, hair wild, face flushed from running. "Oh my God, Brianna," she gasped, pulling her into a tight hug. Brianna finally let the tears fall. Big, ugly sobs shook her body. She buried her face in Cassandra's shoulder and cried for everything. The fear, the fight, the injustice, the weight of being strong for too long. The officers finished their sweep, taking statements, marking evidence. The man they caught had no ID on him. Just a burner phone with one text message sent right before he showed up at Brianna's house. "Scare her. No cops. Make her back off." The number the message came from was already disconnected. But it didn't matter. Brianna knew exactly where it led. Straight back to the ones trying to silence her. Straight back to the people who wanted to bury the truth. Cassandra knelt beside her, her voice low and fierce. "This means we're close," she said. "They're scared. They're desperate." Brianna nodded, wiping her face. "I'm not backing down," she said. "Good," Cassandra said, squeezing her hand. "Because we just got a call. Agent Hudson wants you at a press conference tomorrow morning. They're taking the case public." Brianna's eyes widened. "Public? Yes. Full investigation announcement. They want you there. They want you to speak." Brianna's stomach twisted. She hated crowds. Cameras. Attention. But this wasn't about her anymore. It was about every mother like Latasha. Every nurse. Every woman who had been judged by the color of her skin instead of the strength of her spirit. And it was about Caleb. It was about the future he deserved. Brianna kissed her son's forehead and tucked him back into bed, pulling the blanket up to his chin. He looked up at her, trust shining in his tired eyes. "You're my hero, Mommy," he whispered. She brushed his hair back gently. "No, baby. You're mine." Outside, police cars still lined the street, lights flashing gently in the dark. But inside the house, inside Brianna's heart, a new kind of fire had been lit. And this time, she was ready for the fight ahead. The morning of the press conference dawned gray and heavy, the clouds hanging low like a blanket threatening rain. Brianna stood in front of the mirror, smoothing her hands over the simple navy blazer Cassandra had lent her. It was a little big at the shoulders, but it made her feel strong. She tied her hair back, staring at her reflection. There were dark circles under her eyes. A faint bruise on her elbow from falling during the rush to grab Caleb. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the enormous weight of what was about to happen. This wasn't just a courtroom anymore. This wasn't just her small life in a small corner of the world. This was a spotlight, and she couldn't afford to flinch. In the living room, Caleb ate breakfast quietly, his little backpack ready for school. Brianna crouched beside him. "After this, everything's going to be okay," she promised. "I have to go talk to some people, but I'll be back before dinner. Okay. Caleb nodded. Will there be a lot of people? A lot, she admitted. But it's important. He hugged her tightly. Be brave, Mommy. She hugged him back, breathing in his warmth, his innocence. I will, baby. I promise. Outside City Hall, the street buzzed with energy. Reporters packed the sidewalk, cameras balanced on shoulders, microphones raised like a field of sunflowers. News vans idled by the curb, satellite dishes pointed skyward. A long table with a podium had been set up under a white awning. An official seal of the Department of Justice was stamped across the front. Agent Hudson stood off to the side, clipboard in hand, talking to a man in a dark suit. When she spotted Brianna, she immediately waved her over. You ready? Hudson asked. Brianna swallowed hard. As I'll ever be. Hudson placed a steady hand on her shoulder. You're not alone up there. We're right beside you. Brianna nodded, breathing deeply. She wasn't sure if she believed it yet, but she was going to act like she did. Cassandra appeared next, dressed sharply in a black suit, hair pulled back into a sleek bun. She smiled. You're going to change things today. I don't feel like a hero, Brianna whispered. You don't have to feel like one, Cassandra said. You just have to be one. Hudson tapped the microphone. It squealed to life. All right, everyone, she called. We'll begin in 2 minutes. Reporters surged closer, their pens and cameras ready. Brianna's stomach twisted painfully. She could almost hear the whispering. There's the nurse. That's the one who stood up to the judge. That's the one who went viral. But then she remembered Caleb's face. His small voice telling her to be brave. She straightened her shoulders. And when they called her name, she walked to the podium. The cameras flashed blindingly. Microphones jostled. Brianna gripped the edges of the podium tightly, grounding herself. She looked out across the sea of faces. Some curious, some skeptical, a few, shining with hope. She cleared her throat. My name is Brianna Jefferson, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. I'm a registered nurse. I'm a mother. And 3 weeks ago, I stood in a courtroom to fight for my son. The crowd hushed. I wore my hospital scrubs that day because I didn't have time to change after saving lives. But instead of being seen for my sacrifice, I was judged for how I looked. Dismissed. Shamed. More cameras clicked. Pens scribbled furiously. I spoke up. Not because I wanted attention, but because I had no choice. Because silence would have cost me everything. Her voice trembled now, but she didn't stop. What happened to me in that courtroom wasn't an isolated mistake. It was part of a pattern. A system that too often sees women like me, black women, working women, as less credible, less worthy, less human. The crowd grew stiller. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. But we are not less. We are not invisible. A murmur of agreement rose from somewhere near the back. Brianna's confidence grew. I'm standing here today not just for myself, but for every mother who's been silenced, every worker who's been overlooked, every child whose future was decided by prejudice instead of fairness. She looked directly into the cameras now. We are demanding better. Not tomorrow. Not someday. Now. The last word echoed across the plaza. Agent Hudson stepped forward, taking the podium as Brianna stepped back, heart hammering wildly in her chest. Hudson announced the federal investigation into Judge Robert Kellerman, citing multiple complaints, patterns of discrimination, and evidence of potential misconduct. She confirmed that the Department of Justice was pursuing the case aggressively, and that Brianna's courage had been the spark. The press went wild, shouting questions, cameras flashing, reporters waving their microphones in the air. But Brianna heard none of it. She heard only the steady beat of her heart. And somewhere, faint but certain, the sound of doors creaking open for others who had been trapped behind them for too long. Later that evening, after the crowds had cleared and the sun dipped behind the skyline, Brianna and Cassandra sat in a quiet diner, nursing cups of lukewarm coffee. You were incredible, Cassandra said. Truly. Brianna smiled wearily. I feel like I could sleep for a year. You earned it. Cassandra's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then grinned. What? Brianna asked. The governor's office just issued a public statement. They're launching a full review of family court procedures across the entire state. Brianna dropped her coffee spoon with a clatter. Because of today? Because of you. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, Brianna laughed. A real laugh. Full and light. They clinked coffee mugs together like champagne glasses. To truth, Cassandra said. To fighting the good fight, Brianna added. And deep inside, Brianna knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long. There would be battles still to fight. But for the first time, she didn't feel alone. She had Caleb. She had friends. She had a voice. And no one, not judges, not threats, not fear, could take that away from her again. As they stepped out into the cool evening air, Brianna looked up at the stars peeking out through the clouds. A promise glimmered there. One she made to herself, to Caleb, to every woman who would come after her. We will not be silenced. We will not be small. We will not be less. The next few days moved like a storm. Fast, overwhelming, and impossible to control. Everywhere Brianna turned, people recognized her. At the grocery store, at Caleb's school pickup line, even in the hospital halls when she visited work to check in. Some people clapped her on the back and said, "Good job." Others simply gave her a nod that said, "I see you. I believe you." The investigation into Judge Kellerman exploded in the media. Every news channel ran segments about the years of quiet injustice, stories that had been buried, ignored, or dismissed. More women came forward, filing sworn affidavits. Some had lost custody. Some had lost faith. But now, they found courage in Brianna's story. And still, underneath the new light and hope, shadows remained. Threats online, harassing messages, ugly comments that reminded Brianna exactly why this battle was so important. One afternoon, as she picked Caleb up from school, she spotted a sleek black car idling across the street, the same kind of car that had come to her house that terrifying night. Her heart skipped. She stiffened, reaching instinctively for her phone. But then she saw the license plate, government tags. It was protection this time, not a threat. Agent Hudson had quietly arranged for a watch detail to keep an eye on Brianna and Caleb until the investigation wrapped up. Brianna exhaled slowly. The world wasn't safe yet, but it was getting safer, one step at a time. A week later, Brianna stood inside a grand old courthouse, not the one where she'd been humiliated, but the federal court downtown. Cassandra stood at her side, shuffling a stack of documents. Today wasn't about testifying. Today was about finishing what they started. Latasha arrived next, her hoodie replaced with a clean white blouse. She looked nervous but determined. When she saw Brianna, she smiled shyly. "Wouldn't have made it here without you," Latasha said. Brianna squeezed her hand. "We made it together." Inside the hearing room, the atmosphere was different from anything Brianna had experienced before. There was no shouting, no scolding, only a panel of federal judges sitting quietly, listening. Agent Hudson presented the evidence with surgical precision. The pattern of misconduct, the financial records, the inappropriate communications between Judge Kellerman and certain attorneys, including Daniels. Every lie, every manipulation, every unfair ruling, laid out in black and white. When they called Brianna to speak, she walked to the stand with steady legs and clear eyes. She told her story simply, not with anger, not with tears, just truth. The court clerk recorded every word. And when she finished, the head judge nodded respectfully. "Thank you, Ms. Jefferson. Your bravery has made a difference that will be felt for generations." Brianna returned to her seat beside Cassandra, her heart pounding with a new feeling, not fear. Pride. A few days later, the news broke. Judge Robert Kellerman permanently removed from the bench, facing charges for ethics violations and conspiracy to obstruct justice. The article went on to say that reforms were already underway to better protect parents, especially mothers of color, in family courtrooms. Brianna sat in her kitchen, reading the article on her phone, tears blurring the screen. She felt a soft tug at her sleeve. "Mommy," Caleb asked, peeking up at her. "Are you okay?" She wiped her face quickly and smiled. "I'm more than okay, baby." He crawled into her lap, still small enough to fit if he curled up. She wrapped her arms around him, breathing in the warm, familiar scent of crayons and peanut butter. They sat like that for a long time. Safe. Together. Free. A week later, something surprising happened. Brianna received a letter in the mail, thick, cream-colored paper with an official gold seal embossed at the top. She frowned, tearing it open carefully. It was from the governor's office. "Dear Ms. Jefferson, on behalf of the state of New York, it is my honor to inform you that you have been selected to receive the Medal of Civic Courage for your outstanding contribution to justice and equality. Your bravery has inspired countless others, and helped spark reforms that will better protect families across our state. The ceremony was scheduled for the following month. Formal. Televised. Brianna laughed aloud, half in disbelief, half in wonder. She, Brianna Jefferson, a tired nurse, a scared mom, was going to stand on a stage and receive a medal for telling the truth, for standing up when it was hardest. The night before the ceremony, Brianna sat on the porch with Cassandra and Latasha, a cooler of lemonade between them. They talked about small things, Caleb's school projects, Latasha's new job at a daycare, Cassandra's idea to start a free legal clinic for single mothers. The air buzzed with crickets and far-off car horns. Brianna leaned back, gazing up at the stars. She thought about all the moments she'd almost given up, all the nights she'd cried into a pillow, terrified she wasn't enough. And now, somehow, she had helped build something bigger than herself. A better future, not just for Caleb, but for everyone who would walk into a courtroom after her. Everyone who would wear their scrubs or uniforms or work boots with pride, knowing they belonged. No questions asked. No judgment passed. Just respect. Brianna smiled, feeling peace settled deep in her bones. It had been a long fight. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. And it was only the beginning. The grand hall of the governor's mansion gleamed under soft golden lights. Rows of polished wooden chairs lined the marble floor, and a wide velvet stage stretched across the front of the room. Everything smelled like old books and polished brass, the weight of history pressing gently into the air. Brianna stood at the side of the stage, heart pounding. Caleb clutched her hand, wearing his best tiny suit, looking up at her with wide, proud eyes. "You look like a superhero," he whispered. She smiled, brushing invisible lint from his shoulder. "And you look like my sidekick," she teased. From across the stage, Cassandra gave her a reassuring nod. Latasha sat in the audience, her two young daughters giggling softly beside her. Friends from the hospital had shown up too, nurses in scrubs, doctors in lab coats. Even Sam the security guard waving a homemade sign that said, "Our hero." The governor, a tall woman with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, stepped up to the microphone. "Today," she said, "we honor individuals whose courage has not only changed lives, but changed laws. Individuals who remind us that real heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear scrubs." The audience laughed gently. Brianna squeezed Caleb's hand tighter. The governor continued. When Brianna Jefferson stood up in that courtroom, tired from saving lives, wearing the uniform of her calling, she reminded us all that dignity does not come from clothing. It comes from character. Applause broke out. Brianna's eyes burned, but she held her head high as the governor called her name. She walked onto the stage, every step feeling like a step out of fear and into something new, something permanent. Freedom. The medal was heavy as the governor placed it around her neck. "You didn't just save your son," the governor whispered as they shook hands. "You saved hope." Brianna turned to the audience, blinking against the flash of cameras. For a long moment, she just stood there, a nurse, a mother, a fighter, letting it all sink in. And then the applause rose again, louder, fuller, carrying her forward like a wave. Caleb clapped the hardest of them all, his little hands bright and quick. Brianna stepped to the microphone, her voice steady. "Thank you," she said simply. "This medal is not just for me. It's for every mother who thought she wasn't enough. Every worker who was judged by the clothes they wore. Every child who needs to know that love, not money, not power, not fear, is what makes a family strong." She paused, her heart full to bursting. "I stood up because I had no choice. And I will keep standing, for all of us, until no one ever doubts that we belong." The room exploded into cheers. Tears filled her eyes, but she let them fall freely this time. Because they were tears of victory, tears of pride, tears of a battle fought and won. Later that night, back at home, Brianna tucked Caleb into bed. The medal sat on the nightstand beside his drawing of the two of them, stick figures, one in a superhero cape, the other wearing scrubs. Both smiling. "Mommy," he said sleepily, "you're famous now." She chuckled, smoothing his hair back. "Maybe a little, but you know what's even better than being famous?" "What?" he mumbled. "Being free." He smiled and closed his eyes. Brianna sat on the edge of his bed, watching him breathe, letting the quiet fill the room. She had fought with everything she had, her voice, her courage, her heart. And now, finally, She could rest. The battle was over. The storm had passed. And the future, for her, for Caleb, for so many others, was wide open, bright, unstoppable, and filled with hope.